It was a bright Tuesday morning in Washington, D.C., and the streets were alive with movement. People walked quickly along the sidewalks, some with coffee in hand, others carrying briefcases or school bags. Cars honked occasionally, and the soft hum of city life filled the air. Among the crowd walked Daniel Harris, a man in his late 40s with neatly combed hair and a calm, thoughtful expression. He wore a dark suit with a blue tie, simple but elegant. Despite holding the important title of U.S. Senator, Daniel preferred to blend in whenever he could. He enjoyed observing ordinary life, listening to the conversations around him, and feeling connected to the people he served. That morning, Daniel decided to visit a local cafe he had frequented long before he entered politics. The cafe was small, with large glass windows that let in sunlight and the smell of fresh pastries that floated into the street. Daniel had always appreciated simple pleasures like a warm cup of coffee and the quiet of a morning before work began in full. He approached the entrance, noticing a few police officers standing nearby. At first, he did not pay much attention. Officers were a common sight in the city, and he thought they might be there for regular security. As Daniel drew closer, one officer stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir, could you come over here?" he said, his voice firm. Daniel smiled politely. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked. "You're trespassing on private property," the officer replied. "We received a complaint about someone entering without permission." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "Trespassing?" "Officer, I'm just here for coffee. I have been here many times before. I did not know there was an issue today." The officer looked serious and did not respond. Another officer approached, and before Daniel could continue speaking, they gently but firmly held his arms. He tried to explain, but they insisted he come with them to the patrol car. Daniel remained calm. "Please check my identification. I am a U.S. Senator," he said. The officers glanced at each other, then back at him. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one officer said. Daniel did not resist, knowing that arguing would only make the situation worse. People in the cafe and on the street had stopped to watch. Some took out their phones, capturing the surprising scene. Patrons whispered to each other, unable to believe what they were seeing. Daniel, despite the situation, maintained a composed and polite demeanor. He spoke to the officers with respect, answering questions clearly. Inside, he felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. How could anyone treat an elected official, someone trusted by thousands of people, like a suspect for simply walking into a cafe? At the police station, the officers began the booking process. "Sir, we still need to verify your identity." "Can you state your name and position?" one officer asked. Daniel handed over his identification card. The officer's eyes widened as they read it. "Senator Daniel Harris?" one said, voice filled with surprise. "You are a U.S. Senator?" "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "That is correct." A quiet tension filled the room. The officers realized they had made a mistake. They had acted on a complaint without knowing who the man was. Daniel remained composed, listening to their apologies. Meanwhile, outside the station, news of the arrest spread quickly. Some citizens who had witnessed the incident shared videos on social media. Within minutes, the videos had hundreds of views, and people were commenting in disbelief. "How could this happen?" wrote one viewer. "Even a senator is not safe," wrote another. "This is shocking," a third commented. Inside, the officers spoke quietly among themselves. They apologized to Daniel repeatedly. "We acted too quickly without checking," one officer admitted. "We did not know who you were." Daniel nodded politely. "I understand mistakes happen," he said, "but this shows a larger problem. Everyone should be treated with fairness and respect. No one should face this kind of misunderstanding." The officers agreed and released him immediately. They helped him gather his belongings, still looking embarrassed. By now, reporters had arrived, eager to hear his statement. Daniel stepped outside, facing the cameras with calm confidence. "Today I experienced something that should not happen to anyone," he said clearly. Being treated as a suspect while simply trying to enjoy a cup of coffee was both surprising and upsetting. "I hope this incident encourages people to think about fairness and respect in our communities. Everyone deserves to be treated justly, regardless of their background or position." The crowd listening applauded quietly. Some approached to shake his hand, showing support and understanding. Others simply nodded, acknowledging the unfairness of the situation. Daniel smiled. knowing this moment could be used to highlight a broader issue. After leaving the station, Daniel returned to his office. He was tired but determined. He contacted his colleagues explaining what had happened, and together, they prepared a plan for a public statement. Daniel wanted the story to be more than just an incident. He wanted it to inspire awareness and meaningful action. He thought about the people who had witnessed the arrest and shared their videos. Their reactions showed hope, a belief that fairness mattered. Daniel reflected on his own life and career. Even with power and influence, he realized he was not immune to challenges faced by ordinary citizens. This event reminded him why he had entered politics, to make a positive difference for everyone. That evening, Daniel sat by his office window, looking out at the city lights. Cars moved slowly along the streets. People walked briskly on the sidewalks, and the city continued its usual rhythm. Daniel thought about the conversation he wanted to start. Tomorrow he would address the public directly, using this incident to encourage dialogue about respect, equality, and justice. He knew this was only the beginning of a larger conversation. It was a moment that could bring awareness and change. Daniel felt a quiet determination, understanding that his role as a senator carried both responsibility and opportunity. He was ready to take this experience and use it to make a difference, ensuring that no one would face such treatment unfairly again. The night grew darker, but Daniel's mind was active, planning speeches, interviews, and discussions. He understood that the story would gain attention, but he also knew that attention was an opportunity to educate and inspire. This incident, though stressful, had opened a door to progress, and Daniel intended to walk through it with courage and wisdom. By the time he left the office, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to face the challenges ahead and to turn this surprising event into a positive force for change. The city outside was still bustling, but inside, Daniel felt a quiet determination that this story, and the lessons it held, would be remembered for a long time. The next morning, the city seemed different. The story of Daniel Harris, the senator who had been arrested for trespassing at a local cafe, had spread like wildfire. Social media platforms were buzzing with videos of the incident, showing Daniel being politely led by the officers and calmly explaining who he was. News channels picked it up as a breaking story, and anchors repeated the shocking footage, unable to hide their disbelief. In his office, Daniel sat quietly at his desk, reviewing statements from staff and colleagues. His phone kept buzzing with messages, emails, and calls. Journalists wanted interviews. Citizens shared their opinions, and fellow politicians expressed both concern and curiosity. Daniel remained calm, focusing on the important work ahead. He knew this story could easily become chaotic if handled poorly. His priority was to ensure that the message was clear. Fairness and respect must be for everyone, not just for some. By mid-morning, reporters began arriving at his office building. Cameras were set up outside the entrance, microphones pointed toward the doors, and news vans parked along the street. Daniel walked calmly to the front steps, waving at citizens and reporters alike. People had gathered to see him, some holding signs that said "Justice for everyone" and "Respect matters." Daniel took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "Yesterday, I experienced something no citizen should face. I was treated as a suspect while trying to enjoy a cup of coffee. This was not only surprising, it was troubling. But I believe this incident can help us start a conversation about fairness and equality in our communities." The crowd listened intently, some nodding, others filming his speech on their phones. Daniel continued, speaking with patience and conviction. "Every day people face misunderstandings, unfair treatment, or discrimination. No one should feel powerless in these moments. My experience shows that even those in positions of influence are not immune to mistakes in judgment. We must work together to ensure justice and respect are always present, for everyone." Meanwhile, the cafe where the incident occurred was also under the spotlight. News crews interviewed the owner and several employees. The owner admitted that he had called the police out of caution, unsure who Daniel was at the time. "I thought someone might be trespassing," he explained. "I did not know it was Senator Harris. It was an honest mistake. We never intended for this to happen, and we apologize for the misunderstanding." Social media exploded with opinions. Many praised Daniel for his calm and dignified response, calling him a role model. Others criticized the cafe for acting hastily. The videos of Daniel being led by the police were shared millions of times, with hashtags like respect matters, and justice for everyone trending. People debated how such incidents could be prevented and discussed the broader issues of fairness, racial equality, and accountability in public spaces. Inside his office, Daniel held a series of meetings. His staff prepared press releases, while his advisors suggested ways to turn the story into a positive discussion on community relations. Daniel remained focused, emphasizing that the goal was not to create conflict but to educate and inspire action. "This is bigger than me," he said. "It is about how we treat every citizen. We can use this moment to make our communities safer, fairer, and more understanding." As the day progressed, Daniel received calls from other senators and political leaders. They expressed shock and support, assuring him that the incident would not go unnoticed. Some suggested holding a congressional hearing to address issues of police procedures and citizen treatment. Daniel appreciated the support, but reminded them that the focus should remain on fairness, understanding, and constructive solutions. Later in the afternoon, Daniel returned to the cafe. He wanted to meet the employees in person, to thank them for their honesty and to help bridge the gap caused by the misunderstanding. The staff greeted him warmly, a mix of relief and respect in their expressions. Daniel spoke to each one individually, emphasizing that mistakes happen but learning from them was important. "Thank you for being open and honest," Daniel said. "This situation could have been much worse, but your willingness to address it responsibly helps all of us. Together, we can make sure such misunderstandings do not happen again." The cafe employees nodded, visibly touched by his words. Daniel then spoke to the small crowd of onlookers outside. "We all have a responsibility to treat others with respect and care. This is how communities grow stronger. When we work together, when we listen to one another, we can prevent unnecessary conflicts and build trust." By evening, Daniel returned to his office. The day had been exhausting, filled with interviews, meetings, and public appearances. Yet he felt a sense of accomplishment. His message had reached thousands, if not millions, and people were starting to think about fairness and justice in new ways. He sat quietly, reviewing the events of the past 24 hours. The arrest, although shocking, had become a catalyst for discussion and awareness. Daniel understood that media attention could be fleeting, but the opportunity to inspire change was not. He began drafting a public letter to citizens, sharing his experience, lessons learned, and suggestions for improving community relations and police interactions. While working late, Daniel received a message from a young student who had witnessed the event. The student wrote about how seeing a senator treated like any other citizen made them realize that fairness and respect were vital values. Daniel smiled as he read the message. It reminded him that this incident, although difficult, was already making a difference. The next morning, Daniel's letter was published online and sent to local newspapers. It detailed the incident, explained his perspective, and encouraged dialogue on fairness, respect, and accountability. People responded positively, sharing their own stories and experiences. Community groups and organizations reached out to Daniel, expressing interest in working together to prevent similar incidents in the future. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that leadership was not only about passing laws or attending meetings. It was also about listening, educating, and inspiring others. By addressing the situation with patience, dignity, and clarity, he had turned a negative experience into a positive lesson for the community. In the weeks that followed, Daniel continued to speak publicly about his experience. He held town hall meetings, met with police officers and community leaders, and encouraged open discussions about fairness and justice. The incident at the cafe became more than a story about a mistaken arrest. It became a symbol of hope and a reminder that change is possible when people work together. Through it all, Daniel never lost his calm demeanor. He understood that progress required patience, understanding, and courage. He remained focused on the larger goal, building communities where everyone is treated with dignity, where fairness is not optional, and where mistakes become lessons for improvement, rather than reasons for division. By the end of the month, Daniel's experience had sparked citywide initiatives. Workshops were organized to educate citizens and officers alike. Social programs were launched to encourage understanding between community members, and local leaders began discussing policies to ensure better treatment of all individuals. Daniel's initial incident, though unintended, had grown into a movement for respect, fairness, and unity. Even late at night, when the city lights reflected off the windows of his office, Daniel knew that the work was only beginning. The path ahead would require persistence, patience, and empathy. But he was ready. He had turned an unfortunate event into an opportunity for education, inspiration, and change. Weeks had passed since the incident at the cafe, but its effects continued to ripple through the city. Daniel Harris, now recognized not only for his position as a U.S. Senator, but also for the calm dignity with which he handled a surprising arrest, was busier than ever. The story had gained national attention. Interviews, talk shows, and news articles discussed the event, focusing on issues of fairness, accountability, and community respect. Daniel's face appeared on screens across the country, but he remained grounded, concentrating on turning the experience into meaningful action. That morning, Daniel entered the office earlier than usual. He was greeted by a stack of letters from citizens, emails from community leaders, and invitations to speak at schools, civic groups, and police training programs. Some were requests for interviews, while others simply shared personal stories about unfair treatment or misunderstandings in public spaces. Daniel read each one carefully, making notes and responding where possible. His assistant, Maria, approached with a concerned look. "Senator Harris, the media keeps asking if you will take legal action against the cafe or the officers involved. They want a statement today." Daniel shook his head gently. "No, Maria. The goal is not punishment. The goal is understanding and improvement. If this situation teaches us anything, it is that mistakes can happen, and we should focus on preventing them in the future, rather than blaming individuals." Maria nodded, admiring his patience. "You are handling this better than anyone could imagine. People are inspired by your response." Daniel smiled softly. "I hope so. This is bigger than me. It is about fairness for every citizen." Later, that day, Daniel attended a meeting with community leaders and representatives from the police department. The room was filled with energy, a mixture of anticipation and careful seriousness. Everyone knew this was an opportunity to create positive change from an unfortunate event. Daniel began the meeting with a calm voice. "We are here today to discuss ways to improve interactions between citizens and law enforcement. My own experience shows that misunderstandings can occur even when intentions are good. What matters is how we respond and learn from them." A police officer named Lieutenant Stevens spoke next. "Senator, your experience has opened our eyes. We want to work with community leaders to ensure our officers are better trained and more aware of the situations they face. We are ready to learn and improve." Daniel nodded. "I appreciate that. Education, empathy, and awareness are key. We must teach officers to approach situations calmly and carefully, understanding that everyone has dignity and rights. At the same time, we need citizens to understand their responsibilities and rights so that interactions are smooth and respectful." Community leaders shared ideas, emphasizing communication programs, workshops, and neighborhood events where citizens and officers could meet in informal settings. The conversation was productive, and by the end of the meeting, a clear plan had emerged. Daniel felt encouraged. He knew change would not happen overnight, but progress had begun. Meanwhile, the story continued to circulate in the media. Some commentators criticized the cafe and the officers, while others praised Daniel's response. People debated fairness, equality, and accountability. Daniel did not let the criticism distract him. Instead, he used interviews to repeat his main message. Fairness, respect, and education were more important than blame. One afternoon, Daniel received an invitation to speak at a citywide forum on community relations. The forum included officials from local government, police representatives, educators, and citizens. Daniel accepted immediately, seeing it as an opportunity to influence policy and promote dialogue. On the day of the forum, the auditorium was filled to capacity. Citizens sat attentively and cameras were positioned to capture the event. Daniel walked onto the stage confidently but humbly. He looked at the crowd and began to speak. "Thank you all for coming. I want to share an experience that has been both challenging and enlightening. Recently, I was involved in an incident that highlighted the importance of fairness and understanding. I was arrested mistakenly while visiting a cafe, even though I am a U.S. Senator. This experience was surprising, but it reminded me of something. Important mistakes happen, but how we respond matters. He paused, allowing the audience to absorb his words. Every citizen deserves to be treated with respect. Every officer deserves support and guidance to perform their duties well. When misunderstandings occur, it is an opportunity to learn, to educate, and to grow stronger as a community. The audience responded with applause. Some stood, acknowledging the honesty and clarity in Daniel's words. Several citizens shared personal experiences of being misunderstood or treated unfairly. Daniel listened carefully, responding with empathy and guidance. He emphasized that learning from mistakes and promoting awareness could prevent future incidents. After the forum, Daniel spent time speaking with participants one-on-one. He encouraged them to think critically about community interactions, to report misunderstandings without fear, and to work together to create a culture of respect. Teachers suggested incorporating lessons about rights, fairness, and communication into school programs. Officers proposed training sessions focused on empathy and observation skills. Daniel noted everything carefully, seeing the potential for lasting impact. That evening, Daniel returned to his office exhausted but inspired. He reflected on the progress of the past few weeks. What had started as an embarrassing and frustrating incident had grown into a movement for understanding. Citizens were speaking out, officers were listening, and policy discussions were beginning. Daniel knew that leadership was about more than policy. It was about example, dialogue, and encouragement. His phone rang late at night. It was a call from a community activist named Sarah who had attended the forum. "Senator Harris, your speech inspired us," she said. "We are organizing workshops to promote fairness and respect. Your story has motivated people to take action." Daniel smiled, feeling satisfaction. "Thank you, Sarah. I am glad this has had a positive impact. Keep me informed, and let me know how I can help." Change starts with conversations like the ones you are leading. Over the next few days, Daniel continued to appear on radio shows, local television, and in newspapers. Each time he repeated the same key message: fairness, respect, and education are essential for a functioning society. He emphasized the importance of understanding both sides of any situation and using mistakes as lessons rather than reasons for conflict. Even as his schedule became busier, Daniel made time for citizens who reached out directly. He met with families, students, business owners, and community groups. Every conversation reminded him why public service mattered. People trusted him not just because he held office, but because he listened, acted with integrity, and remained calm under pressure. By the end of the month, Daniel's experience had begun to influence policy discussions in the city council. Proposals were being considered to improve police training programs, enhance community awareness, and implement systems for better communication between citizens and authorities. Daniel felt a quiet pride. What had once seemed like a negative experience had turned into a force for positive change. As he walked home one evening, Daniel thought about the journey so far. The arrest at the cafe had been shocking, but it had opened a door to dialogue, understanding, and progress. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but he was determined to continue his work. Daniel looked at the city skyline, the lights reflecting off the buildings and the streets below. He understood that leadership was a continuous effort, a balance of listening, acting, and inspiring. Mistakes and challenges would come, but with calm, patience, and integrity, they could be turned into opportunities for learning and growth. That night, Daniel wrote in his journal, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He reminded himself that every citizen deserved dignity and respect, that every interaction mattered, and that change required persistence. The city outside was quiet, but inside Daniel's mind, the energy of progress and hope was alive and strong. The weeks following the cafe incident had brought Daniel Harris into the public eye more than ever before. While he had hoped the story would inspire understanding and fairness, he quickly realized that with attention came both support and criticism. Messages poured in from citizens praising his calm and dignified approach. Yet some political commentators began questioning his decisions. Some wondered why a senator would involve himself so publicly in a local incident, while others speculated about his motives. Daniel, however, remained focused on his purpose, turning the experience into an opportunity for real change. One morning, Daniel arrived at the office to find an urgent memo waiting for him. A new proposal was being introduced in the city council, one that directly responded to the incident at the cafe. The proposal suggested improved training for law enforcement, workshops for citizens, and a community advisory board to monitor interactions. Daniel smiled, recognizing the potential, but he also noticed that some council members were framing the proposal as political theater, questioning whether it was necessary or merely a publicity stunt. Daniel gathered his staff for a meeting. "This proposal has the potential to make a real difference," he said firmly. "We must support it carefully, with facts, examples, and clear explanations of how it benefits the community. Our focus should be on fairness and safety, not politics." His assistant Maria nodded. "Senator, the media is already divided. Some are praising your efforts while others are criticizing every action you take." Daniel took a deep breath. "I expected that. Leadership always attracts attention, both positive and negative. We must remain calm, continue our work, and let results speak louder than words." Later that afternoon, Daniel attended a press conference organized to introduce the proposal publicly. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing and microphones held high. Daniel spoke with steady confidence. "Today we present a plan to strengthen relationships between citizens and law enforcement. Our goal is simple: fairness, respect, and understanding for all. This initiative will include better training for officers, community workshops, and open communication channels so that misunderstandings, like the one I experienced, can be avoided in the future." Reporters asked questions quickly. One journalist asked, "Senator Harris, some critics say this proposal is unnecessary and politically motivated. How do you respond?" Daniel smiled calmly. "This proposal is not about politics. It is about people. Every citizen deserves to be treated with dignity, and every officer deserves the guidance and support needed to do their job well. If this initiative helps even one community member or officer understand this better, it is worth it." Another reporter asked, "Do you think your personal experience at the cafe influenced this proposal?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, it did. But it is not about me. It is about what that experience represents: the need for fairness, understanding, and clear communication. Mistakes happen, but we can use them to create positive change." The press conference generated both excitement and debate. News outlets highlighted the initiative's goals, but some commentary programs questioned Daniel's motivations. Daniel anticipated this and remained undisturbed. He knew that meaningful change often comes with scrutiny and criticism, and he was prepared to face both. Over the next few days, Daniel visited local community centers and schools to speak about fairness and respect. He encouraged students to understand their rights and responsibilities, and he advised local groups on ways to create safer and more respectful environments. Each interaction reinforced his belief that education and awareness were the keys to preventing misunderstandings and conflict. One afternoon, Daniel received an invitation to speak at a citywide police training seminar. Officers from across the district would be attending, and the focus was on communication and empathy. Daniel accepted immediately, seeing it as an opportunity to share insights from his experience and help officers improve their approach. At the seminar, Daniel addressed the room filled with officers. "I want to share a story that illustrates the importance of careful communication and empathy," he began. "Recently, I was involved in an incident at a local cafe. I was mistakenly identified as trespassing, even though I was a U.S. Senator. While it was a shocking experience, it reminded me how misunderstandings can happen and how important it is to approach every situation with calmness and respect." He continued, "Every citizen has rights and every officer has responsibilities. When we work together, when we listen and communicate clearly, we build trust and prevent unnecessary conflict. Mistakes can become lessons if we handle them with care and understanding." The officers listened attentively, asking questions and discussing possible scenarios. Daniel encouraged them to think about how they could approach similar situations in the future, emphasizing patience, observation, and communication. He also reminded them that leadership includes learning from experiences and using them to improve systems for everyone. Meanwhile, political opponents began trying to frame Daniel's work as a personal agenda rather than a genuine effort for the community. Editorials questioned whether the senator was using his story for publicity. Daniel knew the criticism was part of public life, but he remained undeterred. He continued working quietly and effectively, ensuring the focus stayed on community improvement rather than politics. One evening, Daniel returned to his office after a long day of meetings and public appearances. He looked over the progress made so far. Several community workshops had been scheduled, police training sessions were underway, and citizen feedback was being collected. He smiled, realizing that what began as a surprising and uncomfortable experience had evolved into a meaningful movement for fairness and understanding. His assistant, Maria, approached with a folder of letters from citizens. "Senator, these are messages from people who attended your events or workshops. They want to thank you and share their experiences." Daniel read through a few letters, noticing the heartfelt words of gratitude. Parents wrote about how their children felt inspired to speak up when treated unfairly. Officers wrote about how the seminar helped them improve their approach. Community leaders wrote about new ideas for dialogue and collaboration. Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He addressed Maria. "This is why we do this work. It is not about recognition, politics, or headlines. It is about making a real difference in people's lives, even if it is small at first. Each positive action creates a ripple that spreads far beyond what we can see." The following week, Daniel was invited to a televised town hall discussion. Citizens, community leaders, and law enforcement representatives were all part of the conversation. Daniel spoke calmly and clearly, explaining the goals of the new initiatives and encouraging active participation. He answered questions thoughtfully, emphasizing the importance of listening, learning, and building mutual trust. After the town hall, Daniel returned to his office to prepare for a meeting with city council members. The focus was on finalizing plans for long-term community programs and ensuring that initiatives were sustainable and effective. Daniel's leadership style, calm, patient, and grounded in fairness, helped guide the discussion. Council members, even those initially skeptical, expressed support and commitment to the initiatives. By the end of the month, the story of Daniel Harris and the cafe incident had become more than a viral moment. It had inspired citywide programs, influenced policy discussions, and created opportunities for citizens and law enforcement to collaborate. Daniel understood that progress required patience, persistence, and a focus on the greater good. He also recognized that leadership was not about avoiding challenges, criticism, or difficult experiences. It was about using those moments to foster understanding, education, and change. Late one evening, Daniel walked through the quiet city streets, reflecting on the journey so far. The city lights glimmered on the sidewalks and the soft sounds of evening life surrounded him. He thought about the people he had met, the lessons he had learned, and the hope that small actions could lead to meaningful change. Daniel knew that challenges would continue to arise. Public opinion could shift, political opponents would continue to scrutinize every move, and mistakes would still happen. But he also knew that the key to progress lay in patience, empathy, and determination. By remaining calm, listening carefully, and working with integrity, he could turn difficult situations into opportunities for learning and improvement. As he reached his office, Daniel felt a quiet confidence. The cafe incident, which had seemed so disruptive at first, had become a catalyst for growth. It had sparked conversations, inspired action, and reminded everyone that fairness, respect, and understanding were essential values in a thriving community. Months had passed since the incident at the cafe, but its effects continued to shape Daniel Harris's work and life. What had started as a shocking and frustrating experience had grown into a citywide movement for fairness, respect, and understanding. Daniel, now widely recognized not just as a U.S. Senator but as a thoughtful leader, felt the weight of responsibility, yet he was energized by the progress he had helped inspire. That morning, Daniel arrived at his office to a wave of messages. Citizens were sharing updates on workshops, school programs, and community events inspired by his initiatives. Law enforcement officers wrote about how new communication and empathy training had improved interactions with the public. Community leaders thanked him for providing guidance and encouragement. Daniel read through each message carefully, noting ideas that could help improve the programs further. His assistant, Maria, entered with a smile. "Senator, there is an invitation from the mayor. She wants to host a ceremony recognizing your efforts in promoting community fairness and police collaboration." Daniel nodded, thoughtful. "This is not about recognition, Maria, but if it encourages more people to take action, then it is worth attending. We need to focus on the work, not the praise." At the ceremony, city officials, law enforcement representatives, and community members gathered in a bright hall decorated with banners promoting fairness and understanding. The mayor spoke first, acknowledging Daniel's leadership and dedication. She highlighted how one citizen's experience, Daniel's own arrest, had sparked a series of initiatives that were improving communication and trust across the city. When Daniel stepped to the podium, the room fell silent. Cameras flashed and people leaned forward to hear him speak. He took a deep breath, then began with a calm and confident voice. "Thank you for this honor. I am grateful. But I want to remind everyone that this is not about me. This is about what we can achieve together when we focus on fairness, respect, and understanding. One incident, no matter how surprising or frustrating, can be turned into an opportunity for learning and growth. That is what has happened here. Citizens, officers, and community leaders have worked together to create positive change, and I am proud to witness it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The programs we have started, the workshops, and the conversations are just the beginning. Our goal is to make our city a place where every person feels safe, respected, and heard. Mistakes happen, but how we respond to them matters more than the mistake itself. Let us continue to work together to strengthen our communities and ensure fairness for all." The audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Officers nodded, community leaders smiled, and citizens looked inspired. Daniel stepped down from the podium, shaking hands and exchanging words of encouragement with everyone present. He knew that recognition was not the end goal, but it was a sign that progress was being made. Following the ceremony, Daniel continued his work tirelessly. He visited schools to speak with students about fairness, communication, and civic responsibility. He attended community meetings, offering guidance on building stronger relationships between citizens and law enforcement. He met with police officers, sharing lessons from his own experience and encouraging dialogue to improve understanding. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from a national organization focused on community justice. They wanted to highlight his work as a model for other cities. Daniel accepted, knowing that sharing his story could inspire more widespread change. In a televised interview, he spoke with calm authority. "Our goal is simple," he explained. "Every citizen deserves to be treated with respect. Every officer deserves guidance to perform their duties well. Mistakes are natural, but they must be used as opportunities to educate and improve. If our experiences can inspire other communities to adopt similar programs, then we can make a real difference across the country." The interview sparked interest from other cities. Leaders reached out, seeking advice and strategies for creating similar programs. Daniel provided guidance, sharing practical steps, emphasizing patience, empathy, and communication. His story, which began with a surprising arrest at a cafe, was now influencing policies and practices beyond his own city. At home that evening, Daniel reflected on the journey. The incident had been shocking and frustrating, but it had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond what he could have imagined. From the cafe to city programs, from workshops to national recognition, one moment of misunderstanding had grown into a movement for fairness and respect. He thought about the citizens who had shared their stories with him, the officers who had embraced training, and the community leaders who had worked tirelessly to implement programs. Every person had played a role in turning a difficult experience into a positive outcome. Daniel realized that leadership was not about avoiding challenges, but about responding to them with patience, empathy, and determination. The following week, Daniel was invited to speak at a national conference on community relations. Representatives from multiple cities, law enforcement agencies, and community organizations gathered to share ideas and strategies. Daniel stood on the stage speaking with clarity and purpose. "Every community faces challenges," he said. "Mistakes, misunderstandings, and conflicts are part of life. But what matters is how we respond. When citizens and officers work together, When we communicate openly and respectfully, we can build trust and prevent unnecessary conflict. My own experience shows that one incident can inspire change if we approach it with patience, empathy, and determination. He shared examples of programs implemented in his city, highlighting workshops, communication sessions, and community advisory boards. Attendees listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. Daniel encouraged them to adopt similar strategies in their own communities, emphasizing that lasting change required persistence and collaboration. After the conference, Daniel returned home exhausted but inspired. He thought about the journey from that surprising morning at the cafe to the present moment. The incident had challenged him, tested his patience, and brought scrutiny. But it had also created opportunities for education, dialogue, and improvement. He knew the work was ongoing, but he felt proud of the progress achieved. One evening, Daniel received a letter from a young citizen named Maya. She wrote about how she had witnessed the incident at the cafe and later attended one of his workshops. She shared how she felt inspired to speak up when treated unfairly, and how her community had started holding open discussions about respect and communication. Daniel smiled as he read her words. It was a reminder that even small actions could create lasting impact. Daniel wrote a response encouraging Maya and her friends to continue their work. "Your efforts matter," he wrote. "Every conversation, every lesson shared helps build a stronger, fairer community. Keep learning, keep speaking, and keep inspiring others." As the months continued, Daniel's initiatives became embedded in the city. Schools included lessons on respect and communication. Workshops were held regularly for officers and citizens, and community advisory boards monitored progress. Daniel continued to support these efforts, always emphasizing collaboration, patience, and empathy. Looking back, Daniel understood that the cafe incident had been more than a personal challenge. It had been an opportunity to create meaningful change, to inspire dialogue, and to teach lessons about fairness and understanding. What began as a surprising and frustrating moment had transformed into a movement that affected thousands of people and promised to influence countless more in the future. Late at night, Daniel sat by his window, looking out at the city lights. The streets were quiet, but he could feel the energy of change in the air. He thought about the citizens, officers, and community leaders who had joined him on this journey. He knew that leadership required patience, courage, and a commitment to doing what was right, even in the face of challenges. With a deep sense of purpose, Daniel smiled. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been built. Fairness, respect, and understanding were becoming a part of the city's culture, and he was proud to have played a role. The incident that had once seemed so disruptive had become a source of hope, a reminder that even small moments could lead to lasting and meaningful change. And as the city slept beneath the glow of the streetlights, Daniel Harris knew that the work he had started would continue to grow, inspiring future generations to treat every citizen with dignity and every challenge as an opportunity for learning.